Hello and welcome to this podcast from Remtec Talent Management. And I am really excited and interested in this particular subject area that you will have no doubt seen when we've sent this out there. Sales excellence in healthcare, which is a broader topic, but specifically why your CRM is perhaps not doing what you wanted to do. And more importantly, what you can do about it. So I have a subject expert with me today, Marc Ramaer, who I'm delighted to, who's joining us. So Marc, rather than me describe who you are, perhaps you could just give us a quick intro, please, Marc.
Sure. Thanks, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Marc Ramaer. I've been working in medical devices basically since the early 90s. Started as a sales rep in the US. I'm not American. I'm actually Dutch, but I was living there at the time. And worked my way up in the company, ultimately in 2010s and onwards as a sales director, and ultimately ended up with Zimmer Biomet as the director for commercial operations for Europe. So I basically had a sales force of close to 1,200 people across Europe, and worked on sales excellence programs, CRM, and the likes. And after that journey, I ended up working for CEB Gartner in Challenger specifically to help other companies with their sales methodology. So I've kind of been on both sides of the fence and have been able to, over the years, see what I call the good, bad, and the ugly as far as implementations for CRM is concerned, Salesforce management, and everything else, from having carried the bag myself to actually managing a sales force. So hopefully
that's great. So a great introduction, Marc. Thank you. And some of the viewers and listeners might know that I have a particular interest in sales effectiveness, sales excellence, and commercial excellence, because I am, amongst other things, my company also is involved in training around those areas. So I think this particular subject really core to all of that. So perhaps you can just give us an explanation in case there's anybody out there that doesn't know what CRM is, but more importantly, because almost certainly they all will, what is it really intended to do? When this became a big thing, can't remember however many years ago, what were the CRM companies, what were they looking to achieve in terms of the management of sales excellence?
So I think the answer to that is twofold. I think it came predominantly from the executive suite, who wanted to get more visibility and more hygiene on their sales pipeline. So rather than sales reps running around with a notebook to centralize that and to digitize that, it was the intention to basically create more visibility for the executive team, and also create a tool that would help the sales rep in the organization and to be able to handle the volume of information that is coming at people much, much faster these days, to help them manage that, basically. And it's quite good in one aspect, is a kind of a system of record, but it is starting to become evident that it's less good at other things than it was supposed to be at inception.
Yeah. And so in terms of an organization, say it's a medical device organization, some of the listeners and viewers might be from CROs, for example, or even biotech companies. If you're the CEO or the C-suite and you talk about your CRM, and you decide to implement one, what do you actually want to achieve from that, I suppose, is really what I was thinking.
Well, so revenue is the life stream, or the oxygen, the blood of any organization. And given especially the trials and tribulations in medical devices with the pressures on margin and everything else, revenue and predictable revenue became a very important part of your quarterly stock reviews and everything else. The heyday of the 80s and 90s, basically being able to print money, didn't exist anymore. So I think the focus really started to come down on revenue generation and margin preservation, if you will. So pricing. So the price volume mix has become laser focused, and I think the investment in CRM was, again, to create that visibility on what's actually happening on the ground, and are we going to make our numbers for this quarter, for this half of the year, for the full year.
And that's maybe, you know, where the crux of one of the challenges with it lies, isn't it? But let's come back to that, because I think that is, one of the big challenges is that the people on the ground who are actually utilizing it see it as a benefit to somebody else rather than specifically to them, don't they? But let's come back. So we talked a second ago about sales excellence. Let's have a quick conversation around that. What does that mean to you? And I might chuck in some thoughts of my own on that.
So sales excellence really is, to me, having a common language and understanding and approach to customers for the specific industry that you're in. And it can vary quite wildly between certain areas and industries, but in medical devices, the landscape has completely changed, from being a one-to-one sales conversation to a procurement-led team of 10 to 12 people, which changes the sales process entirely. And then with public procurement and tendering and fishing licenses and everything else, it's become extremely complex. So the selling process, even though sales is always sales, it has now become a very intensive process with team buying, and all kinds of other things that are thrown in, including CRM tools and other tools to help productivity, where I think sometimes people lose the forest through the trees, and they don't have. So to go back to your question, sales excellence really, to me, is to be as productive as you possibly can be, or your sales force to be as productive as they can be in the environment they're operating in.
No, I think that's a good summation, really, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right that if we look at the markets that we, as in Remtec, operate in, which is predominantly the healthcare or medical device area, the CRO area, and also biotech, the level of complexity in those markets. There's probably always been a level of complexity in biotech and CRO, but I think, if I cast my mind back to when I was selling medical devices, it was very much a clinically led sell. And particularly with the more sophisticated medical devices, if I was involved in implantable defibrillators, if you convinced the cardiologist, the electrophysiologist, that this was the product that they really wanted to have at their disposal, then you would make the sale. And so all of the effort was really focused on that clinical sale. Now, of course, we have a situation where you could, have Dr. Smith in a particular hospital. Dr. Smith could be completely and utterly convinced that this is the product that they want to use on his or her patients. But in reality, that's only a small part of that total buying process. And as I said, we'll come back to sort of where CRM can be helpful rather than a hindrance. And I think that is, to enable that understanding of your sales team that you are involved in a complex sale, a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder sale, and you need to address this. And I know we'll probably talk about deal health in a minute, but that's one of the key areas, I think, that from a training and a coaching perspective, that is a massive shift for the medical device industry, particularly. It's a massive shift. and how leaders actually understand that and how they can leverage it is going to make the difference between them being successful and unsuccessful. I mean, would you agree with that?
I completely agree. I think in medical devices and orthopedics, and in particular with public procurement, the pendulum has now almost started to swing back a little bit, because the bigger tenders that are out there today, I call them fishing licenses, where any of the big five manufacturers will always be able to get in on the big frameworks. But then the selling actually just starts, because you're actually allowed to sell into any hospital that is on that framework. But then it has now become actually more clinician led, where the five then need to duke it out amongst themselves as far as which hospital gets it. So yes, that the complexity around the buying journey has definitely increased a lot. But I think that pendulum is starting to swing back, where once you're on the framework, the actual selling part then begins again. And so it's going actually back to the beginning, where it's one-to-one.
That was a really interesting point, and I think but again, that definitely speaks to a sophisticated understanding of sales excellence, doesn't it? Because also understanding, in terms of deal health, is okay. If we have addressed those other areas, so now it's returned back to a clinically led sell. And you mentioned orthopedics. Orthopedics is probably more clinically led still than many other areas. So having that understanding, but also understanding where you are on the sales cycle, where you are on that sales journey, I think is again where, if it's utilized properly, then CRM can jump in at that point. So what about, so we touched on this earlier. What about, what it was intended for? Let's be honest, and salespeople listening here will probably this will probably resonate. In my view, it was originally demonstrated, or it was originally developed, shall we say, to attend to what accountants hope would be, predictable outcomes, and so therefore, I think this has created an issue on the ground, hasn't it? I mean, maybe if you can elaborate on what I mean. I know you know what I mean by that, Mark. So what
well,
your comments?
There is always, so if we rewind for a couple of decades, when CRM really started becoming popular, it was a relatively small industry at that time. It's now grown in the last 2 decades by 12x, I think. So it went from 10 billion to 120 odd. And the rep productivity statistics, as far as how much time does a rep actually spend selling, hasn't risen at all over those 2 decades. So the intent for CRM to make the rep more productive has not shown itself in the numbers whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's become more of a tracking tool and a system of record, really. But the fundamental issue is the dichotomy between what it was built for and who ultimately pays for it and ends up using it, versus who puts the data in. And you always ask the question, what's in it for me, right? So the rep, I used to have a little notebook, this is pre-cell phone eras and everything else, where I kept all my deals in and everything else. The CRM tools haven't necessarily changed that whatsoever. They've just digitized it. So the payback for the rep to spend a lot of time inputting data into the CRM tool creates a lot of issues. And I think that's something that we can unpack. But fundamentally, you're asking somebody to do something without getting any value in return. And I think
Yeah,
that's the fundamental problem with CRM at this point in time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that often that fundamental question, which one of my colleagues who I've who does presentation skills often talks about in terms of presentation, is what's in it for me. So in other words, if you're doing a presentation, so the same for this
Yeah.
podcast, hopefully people will see there's something in it for them. That is the question that everybody asks if they buy into something, whether they're purchasing it or whether they're being asked to do it, is what's in it for me. And I think that has been one of the fundamental roadblocks to CRM being, well, it's the cause perhaps of it being less well implemented, and so therefore compliance. Because if we think about it, and I think you said this to me in a previous conversation, Mark, if we think about salespeople, and we've done loads of profiling of salespeople over the years, and some of it, I will say, can be too simplistic, because there's a whole range of people that will make great salespeople, and in the past it used to be, again, rather simplistically thought that very extrovert people make great salespeople because they can talk well and so on. In reality, there's now an understanding that you need a mix across your sales team in terms of comparative introverts as well as extroverts. But one thing remains, is that there is a large number of people who are salespeople where administration is not exactly their bag. If they'd been great at doing all of that, attention to detail, they maybe would have become accountants rather than necessarily salespeople. So that is the crux of part of the issue. So if you give to a group of people who are fundamentally great at doing the things that salespeople do, but not great at administration, hey, what's going to happen? You give them an administration tool as they see it. It's probably not going to produce the results that you want. And to use an old phrase, which I shall amend slightly so it's less rude, it's rubbish in and rubbish out. So
Yeah.
if you haven't got really good data going in, then you can forget about getting reasonable data out. Tell us, because you've led a big team, if you're utilizing a CRM system, let's think about that from a point of view of forecasting. How important is the forecasting to you as a sales leader, and how good do you reckon it is with most CRM systems?
Well, so I'll start off by answering that all forecasts ultimately are wrong.
Mm.
There's not a single forecast in the world that is correct, but it's how little can you make it wrong is the accuracy that you get in your forecasting. And to go back to your point, if you make what I refer to as hunters or salespeople type, that's not going to be. There's basically a behavioral clash there to begin with, and your most successful, if you look at it, any sales force has a bell curve, and you have your medium performers basically is the majority. You have the laggards that probably won't be with the company for too much longer, and then you have the high achievers, the top 20%. Usually those high achievers are the ones that actually don't end up entering stuff into the CRM because they're too busy selling.
And a lot of it's up here in their head.
And a lot of it's there, or in notebooks, or in Excel sheets and things like that. So to answer your question about forecasting, if your top 20 performers aren't necessarily really using CRM the way the management intends them to, obviously your forecast is going to be wrong, and your pipeline and everything else. So the CRM ultimately is blind to the highest performers and potentially the biggest deals.
And let's wind us back to that piece we were talking about, sales excellence in terms of multi-stakeholder. You showed me some really interesting visuals from your system in terms of deal health. Can you talk the listener and viewer through that deal health thing, and how that has an impact on your forecasting?
So To answer that, so with it in CRM design and setup, be careful what you ask for. So the majority of CRM systems that I look into are highly geared towards activity. So it's how many sales calls did you make? How many cold calls did you make? So it's all based on activity. It's not necessarily based on deal progression and deal velocity. So those two things, if you look at companies that are what I would regard to as high performers and have a CRM that actually works well, they're much, much more geared towards deal health, deal progression, deal velocity, and activity. It's not volume. It's the quality of the work that's being done. So if you measure activity, you're going to get loads of activity in your CRM tool because you're paying these people to log activity. But that activity doesn't necessarily equate to better sales, revenue, pipeline, everything else. It's actually the deal health that is the real measurement, and we can get into what that means, but it really is about progression. Stalled deals are 80% of what potentially is in a CRM pipeline, and those deals will never come to fruition. And if the management team is counting on that as revenue every single quarter, they're going to be looking at it going, well, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. And ultimately, then the forecast becomes unpredictable, and then people move away from trusting the CRM system to begin with, which is what they invested money into to get. So it's a vicious circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's one of the other things that one hires salespeople for, or any commercial people, is a sense of optimism, isn't it? I mean, you expect that person to be optimistic. So that presumably also has an effect on that deal health thing, because they want to believe anyway that all of those big deals that Dr. So-and-so has actually said he or she really wants are going to happen.
Right. And so the CRM intent is to capture that and to put a magnifying glass on it in a way. So you do see that the people that enter in the most data into a CRM system and are the most, if you will, quote unquote, compliant in filling in every single field and doing everything, are usually the ones that are overly optimistic in what they're able to sell in that quarter or in that year, because admin wise they're filling everything in, but gut wise and feeling wise and deal progression wise, they're actually not truly understanding the fact that their deal health may be 20 or 30% versus somebody that is pushing deals through at 70 or 80% at a much higher velocity that may not be entering stuff into the CRM. So
yeah, very good. Yeah, no, and then it's I remember we spoke previously also about the regularity that leaders should be looking at their CRM. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, so in experience, there always used to be a monthly pipeline meeting, if you will, that got rolled up into our senior management team. And those used to be quite contentious, I would say, to say the least, because every step that you go up the ladder, people basically have to sign on the dotted line that they will be bringing that revenue in because the executive team is now counting on it. So it really becomes a where CRM actually works to your disadvantage as a management team is when they start using it as a stick instead of a carrot. And that I've seen that happen countless times where a rep may put something into the CRM system, and all of a sudden it's pulled up in a management meeting where they say, "And you said this would happen and that would happen, but it didn't happen, or a deal got pushed back," and they actually get punished for putting in their best version of what's actually happening with the deal. And that's completely counterproductive to what CRM should be. So again, the CRM in and of itself is a fantastic tool. I think the issues that we're kind of now delving into are people problems and behavioral problems more than software problems, if you will.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. And I've seen CRM used in very good ways, and I would say in 20% in the Pareto principle, and 80% I would say in not so good ways.
Very good. So we've got about 5 minutes left to fit inside our target time of 3/4 of an hour.
Yeah.
So we've talked about what it's meant to do. We've also talked about what it probably isn't doing for people. What are the solutions, Marc, in terms of implementation, usage, and addressing? Well, actually, let's address this first. What's in it for me? I'm a sales guy. What are some of the key things in terms of getting me to change from my poor administrative habits and poor implementation? What would be the key things? I know this is going to be a real quick snapshot, but some ideas on there, please.
Yeah, so about half of all CRM implementations fail because they fail the "what's in it for me" question. The ones that do well have a way of giving the rep back value, and I think right now there is a paradigm shift going on, particularly in AI, where instead of continuously feeding this black box with information, there's actually now a way to transform the information and be able to feed the rep back with useful information and guidance on things, for instance, deal health, deal progression, deal velocity. And as soon as a rep understands that the value of the data that they put in is actually useful for them to get back out again, you switch everything that we just discussed, and the rep will actually start to use the CRM tool as it's intended to help progress his deals or her deals, rather than just simply chucking information into a black box. And I think that there's a real shift now. And I also think that AI is probably one of the only things that has come along in the last 2 decades, where a rep's toolkit of 12 odd applications can probably actually be reduced for once, instead of them having to do more on more platforms, is to use less platforms, spend less time on admin, and actually spend more time selling. And the productivity question that we started off with, there's no reason why that 28% shouldn't go up to 40 to 50 to 60% if you use the technology in the right way. And then it's what frees the rep, what they do with their extra time, if you want to call it that. You should, in fact, with the right training and with the right methodology and coaching, if you use that time productively, that rep will no doubt become more productive, and the numbers support that.
And I think this is one of the things, I think, from a training perspective, is the integration of your systems into your training. Quick plug for what Remtec does here now is that our training is specifically focused on the markets that we serve. And there is an opportunity here, I think, for those viewers or listeners who are thinking, well, how do we get better compliance? Well, one of the things is part of the training is to understand, we talked about multi-stakeholder selling, deal health, all of those things that can be integrated into your training and into your CRM system. And if those things aren't aligned, hey, guess what? no training in the world is going to fix it, and no CRM is going to fix it. So getting those things, I think, really, which is obviously why we're having this conversation today, because of the alignment between Marc and I are doing. Tell us very quickly about AI, and also don't be shy. Give a plug for what you're doing and what your company does, and tell us about a little bit about that, Marc.
So Eclair is basically built upon the "what's in it for me" principle, where we've shown already with a few of our implementations that we can sit on top of an existing CRM system without having to rip anything out and go through mega transformations and everything else. Use the data using whatever sales methodology that the company uses traditionally, and have an intelligence layer that is built on top of the CRM that is actually there to serve the rep and to serve the manager, so that the manager will know which reps are using the methodology, which ones aren't using the methodology, which ones, so you can measure as a sales manager all the things that we've just discussed, plus the sales rep can also use the tools to become more productive. So,
and how does it, how can you just give an example of why does it address the "what's in it for me" piece?
Because the sales rep actually will get value returned to them. So
Right.
On average, I would have 20, 25 separate opportunities going on, all the different stages in the pipeline and in the sales funnel. AI is actually able to guide you as a sales rep to say, you haven't spoken to Mrs. Daisy in 3 weeks. This is what you spoke to her about last time. This is what I think would be a good conversation for you to have with her now.
Wow. Yeah.
And and it can also, so we talked about deals stalls being the number one loss of revenue. So to create that momentum, if you have 25 plates spinning in the air, any rep will drop things here and there and not do things that they can. So they need to be able to focus. So Eclair will give you every morning a readout of where you are, what priorities you need to do, what your week, what your next month should look like, and it can be customized basically to fit a specific company's way of working. So it's
so this will,
not,
sorry to interrupt, this as I understand it, most CRM systems have got open APIs, which basically means your system can plug on it. So this isn't a question of saying to a company, you've got to get rid of your existing CRM system.
No, absolutely.
This is taking your existing CRM system, even if maybe, and I was thinking to myself the other day since we last spoke, maybe there are situations where customers have a CRM system which they think, well, maybe it's not that great. Maybe we need to change it. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you need to speak to Marc and get his system to actually be talking to it to make it a damn sight better than it currently is.
Yes, and ultimately the goal of our company is to increase the productivity of the rep, so less admin, more selling time. That is the basic principle. And the time that's gained, we can help guide them into what are the best things to do. And it's again, it's aim, it's not volume, right? So if you aim your efforts into the right areas, and again, this is where the sales methodology, the training, the coaching becomes a huge part, because if you can combine that with more productivity or more free time or less admin time, all of a sudden you have an extremely powerful tool that's never existed before, because the training can be part of the AI package where you have an always-on coach, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we will need to finish there, Marc, but that's fantastic. And fundamentally, this is, the overarching title here was about sales excellence. That is sales excellence, isn't it? That is the crux of it, to actually utilize your time really efficiently, so you've got more sales time, more time to close deals, because that's fundamentally what your salespeople should be, laser focused on, isn't it? Rather than thinking about something they don't particularly like doing and probably aren't very good at doing. So yeah, so thank you, Marc. That's been fantastic. We will put up the contact details for Marc, as well as obviously ourselves, at the end of this. And just say thank you again to Marc. Really fascinating subject area, and I hope those people who have been listening and watching have managed to get something out of it. Thank you, Marc.
I hope so too. And thanks again, Nigel, for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.